The ridicule. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, filled with countless races and strange worlds. Among these worlds, the humans were known for their resilience, their never-ending desire to survive, and their strange, unshakable confidence. But to many, humans were seen as a relic of the past, a race that had long been outpaced by the other more advanced civilizations in the galaxy. On the edge of the galaxy, the mighty Brokor Empire ruled with an iron fist. They were powerful, feared by many, and their ships were the best the galaxy had ever seen. The Brokor fleet was a symbol of dominance. Fast, lethal, and nearly unstoppable. Every other race in the galaxy knew their place, including the humans. The Brokor had no respect for the so-called human legacy. They considered them weak, primitive, and far too far behind to be of any threat. This view was shared by Captain Rethok, one of the Empire's most experienced leaders. Rethok had seen countless species fall to the might of the Brokor. He had fought wars, crushed rebellions, and watched entire civilizations burn to ashes. In his mind, the humans had no place in the galaxy anymore. Their ancient ships were nothing more than floating museums of an outdated race. One day, as the Brokor fleet traveled through a relatively quiet sector, an old signal appeared on their scanners. The transmission was faint, distorted, and nearly impossible to make sense of. A simple distress call, one that seemed to come from a human ship. Rethok scoffed when he saw the signal. Another ghost ship, lost from some forgotten time, he muttered, rolling his eyes. Why even bother? It's not worth the time. Rethok ordered his fleet to move on, but his officers were curious. Captain, the signal's from a human ship. Should we investigate? One of his commanders asked. The captain stared at the map for a moment, then laughed. Do you really think there's anything left to find? The humans are weak. Their ships are ancient, barely able to keep together. It's not worth the effort. Let them be. They've already had their time. The fleet continued its course, dismissing the signal as nothing more than a relic of the past. But as the Brokor ships moved deeper into the sector, the distress call became clearer. It was coming from the wreckage of a forgotten human warship, floating motionless in space. This old ship seemed to be drifting toward the edge of the Brokor Empire's territory. Rethok ordered a close approach. He believed this was the perfect opportunity to teach his crew just how irrelevant the humans had become. After all, no one could challenge the might of the Brokor. As they drew closer, the Brokor fleet could see the ship clearly now. It was old, extremely old. It appeared to have been untouched for centuries. Its hull was covered in scratches, dents, and burn marks from past battles. Its structure was clunky and outdated, unlike anything Rethok had ever seen in the modern era. It looked like a forgotten relic of a bygone era, something that should have been reduced to dust long ago. Look at it, one of Rethok's officers remarked, almost laughing. It's an antique. We should just scrap it and be done with it. Rethok grinned, turning to his officers. This is what's left of the mighty human fleet, a rusting old piece of junk that can't even get out of its own way. His laughter echoed across the comms, and the rest of the crew joined in. They were certain this human ship posed no threat at all. It was an easy target, the last remains of a once proud species now reduced to drifting debris. The Brokor were about to prove once again how superior they were to everyone else. Rethok ordered his fleet to prepare to board the human ship. We'll show the humans that they can't run from the past, he said. Their era is over. As the Brokor fleet closed in on the ancient ship, they continued to mock it, making jokes and jabs about its condition. It was a mockery that had become all too familiar for Rethok. For so long, the Brokor had watched races come and go, but none had fallen as completely as the humans. Their ships, their technology, everything about them was outdated. It was a tragedy that such a strong race had withered and faded into obscurity. They didn't know it yet, but the human ship was not as helpless as they thought. A strange hum began to fill the air. The Brokor crew fell silent, confused at the sudden noise. It wasn't coming from the ship itself, but from something else. Rethok squinted as he glanced at the monitors. Something was changing on the human ship. The old relic that had been drifting lifelessly in space was moving. "Captain, it's powering up," an officer exclaimed, his voice shaking with surprise. Rethok frowned. "Impossible. That ship hasn't moved in centuries." But the ship did move. It wasn't quick, nor was it graceful, but it was moving. And as the old ship slowly turned toward the Brokor fleet, Rethok's confidence began to falter. He ordered the fleet to hold position, his mind racing. Was this a trick? A trap? His doubts would soon be forgotten as the ship began to reveal something the Brokor had never expected. The human ship wasn't helpless at all. This was only the beginning. The Empire would soon learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate humanity. The surprise attack. As the old human ship continued to move, the Brokor fleet held its position, confusion and curiosity spreading across the commanders. No one had expected this. Rethok, though shaken for a moment, quickly regained his composure. He ordered his fleet to open fire. "It's just an old relic," he said. "We'll crush it and be done with it." The first volley of laser fire from the Brokor fleet hit the human ship's hull, shaking it violently. The ship groaned under the force of the impact, sending a ripple through its old battered structure. For a moment, it seemed like the ship would crumble into pieces, as the Brokor had expected. But then something strange happened. Instead of disintegrating or breaking apart, the ship absorbed the blasts with ease. The shields, though old, flared up and shimmered with an eerie light, pushing back the Brokor's fire. Rethok watched, baffled, as his fleet's lasers barely scratched the surface of the ancient vessel. It was like the ship was made of something tougher than anything they had seen before. "Impossible," one of Rethok's officers muttered, staring at the damage reports on the screen. "Our weapons aren't even leaving a dent." But that wasn't the only surprise. As the ship's shields flared, a low hum grew louder, and Rethok's fleet suddenly felt a chill in the air. Then, without warning, the human ship retaliated. A massive beam shot out from the ship's center, cutting through space like a knife through butter. The Brokor fleet's lead ship, a mighty dreadnought, had no time to react. The beam struck it dead on, and in an instant, the entire ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave sent debris scattering in every direction, knocking the Brokor ships off course. Rethok's eyes widened in disbelief. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice low and steady. He could hardly believe what he had just witnessed. His fleet had fired everything they had at the human ship, yet it stood unbroken. And now it had destroyed their lead ship in a single shot. "Captain," one of his officers said, his voice trembling. "The human ship, it's charging another weapon." Before Rethok could respond, the human ship fired again, this time at a different target. Another Brokor vessel, a cruiser, was obliterated in the same way, the beam slicing through space like a death sentence. The Brokor fleet began to panic as they saw two of their ships completely destroyed within moments. "Fall back! Fall back!" Rethok ordered, his voice strained as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The human ship wasn't done yet. The old vessel, though damaged, had begun to fight back with a fury none of the Brokor had expected. The ship's ancient weapons systems, now fully activated, unleashed a storm of firepower, each shot more powerful than the last. The Brokor ships tried to dodge, but their agility couldn't compare to the sheer power and accuracy of the human ship's attacks. In an act of desperation, Rethok commanded his fleet to surround the human ship. "We'll crush it with sheer numbers," he declared, though his voice carried the uncertainty of a commander who wasn't entirely sure if their advantage would be enough to defeat the enemy. But as the Brokor ships surrounded the human vessel, something else happened, something that took Rethok and his fleet completely by surprise. The human ship's engines powered up, and it moved with surprising speed and precision. breaking through the Brolkor encirclement, as if the enemy ships were mere obstacles in its path. One by one, the human ship disabled each Brolkor ship that tried to trap it. A barrage of missiles rained down from the human ship's hull, striking the Brolkor ships with pinpoint accuracy. Rethok watched, stunned, as another one of his ships was torn apart. "We need to retreat now," one of his officers shouted, his voice filled with panic. But Rethok wasn't ready to admit defeat just yet. His pride, his ego, would not allow it. He clenched his fists. "No, we will not retreat. Prepare for a full assault. The human ship cannot be invincible. This is just a fluke. We will destroy it." But as the battle raged on, it became painfully clear to the Brolkor that this was no fluke. The human ship, against all odds, had come alive, and it was more powerful than anything they had ever faced. As the Brolkor fleet attempted to regroup, Rethok found himself facing a terrifying truth. The human ship wasn't just surviving, it was winning. And the longer they fought, the more the Brolkor fleet began to realize that underestimating humanity had been their greatest mistake. The first strike. The Brolkor fleet, now in disarray, struggled to regain control. Their once imposing formation was falling apart under the relentless assault of the human ship. Rethok's confidence was slipping away as he watched the devastation unfold before him. The human ship, once thought to be an outdated relic, was proving itself to be something far more dangerous. He had underestimated its power, and now his fleet was paying the price. As the Brolkor ship scrambled to reposition, the human vessel did not let up. Its weapons continued to fire, relentless and precise. Rethok's fleet, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now losing ships faster than they could defend themselves. The human ship, though battered and scarred from the initial bombardment, was far from finished. It was like a cornered animal fighting for its survival, using everything in its arsenal with a deadly sense of purpose. The Brolkor's attempts to surround the ship had failed, and now they were being picked off one by one. A massive explosion erupted from the side of one of Rethok's cruisers. The ship's engines ignited as the human ship launched another devastating shot, cutting through the cruiser's defenses with ease. The Brolkor cruiser's once proud exterior now turned to scrap metal, falling apart in a fiery cloud of debris. "Captain, we're losing ships too quickly. We have to do something," one of Rethok's commanders screamed, panic rising in his voice. Rethok's grip tightened around his chair. He had always been a tactician, but now the rules of warfare seemed to be changing right in front of him. The human ship was more than just a threat. It was an unstoppable force. He quickly ordered his fleet to break away and regroup. "We need to form a defensive line, regain control of the battlefield." But it was clear now that Rethok's fleet was on the defensive. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were hunting them down, taking out Brolkor ships one by one with strategic precision. The alien fleet, which had once been so confident in their dominance, was starting to panic. The humans had struck with terrifying force, and their fleet was quickly dwindling. The Brolkor were forced to scatter, each ship trying to escape the unrelenting barrage of fire. But the human ship was not about to let them get away. It moved with deadly intent, its engines roaring to life as it powered forward, cutting through space as if it had been designed for this very moment. The Brolkor ships, unable to evade the oncoming ship, were easy targets. Rethok watched in horror as yet another one of his cruisers exploded into the void. The human ship had launched a series of missiles that tore through its shields and into the heart of its engines, sending the ship spinning out of control. A massive explosion followed, and what was once a proud Brolkor warship was now nothing more than burning wreckage. Rethok could feel his grip slipping. The Brolkor had never been this vulnerable, not in his entire career. Their power, their superiority, everything they had built their empire on, was being shattered by an ancient human vessel. He had believed that humanity was a joke, a thing of the past. But as the destruction continued around him, Rethok realized the terrible truth. The humans were not just surviving. They were thriving. In the chaos, the human ship fired again. This time, it aimed for Rethok's flagship, a massive dreadnought that had been the heart of the Brokor fleet. It was the pride of the Empire, a ship that had never been defeated in battle. But as the beam struck, Rethok watched in disbelief as the once invincible dreadnought cracked open like an eggshell. The beam sliced through its hull with ease, and before Rethok could give the order to retreat, the entire ship erupted in a fiery explosion. Rethok's eyes widened. His flagship was gone. And now, the core of his fleet had been broken. The Brokor were losing this battle, badly. This can't be happening, Rethok whispered to himself, his heart pounding. The fear that had been buried deep within him was now impossible to ignore. The humans had turned the tide, and now it was too late to stop them. Rethok looked around at the remaining Brokor ships, most of which were already damaged beyond repair. The crew members were scrambling, trying to keep their ships intact as they fled in every direction. The human ship, relentless as ever, continued its pursuit, picking off stragglers with frightening efficiency. The Brokor were now fighting for their survival, not for victory. And yet, despite the chaos and panic, Rethok couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of respect. The humans were proving themselves in ways no one had ever imagined. They were showing the Brokor that even the most ancient and broken of ships could still hold unimaginable power. In the back of his mind, Rethok began to understand the true nature of the battle. This wasn't just about weapons, tactics, or numbers. It was about pride. The pride of a race that had been mocked, underestimated, and forgotten. The humans were fighting not just for survival, but for their place in the galaxy, and they were doing it in a way that would forever change the Brokor's view of them. The hidden power. The battle had turned into a nightmare for the Brokor fleet. The shock of losing their flagship had sent waves of panic through their ranks, and the remaining ships were struggling to stay intact. Each explosion was like a heavy punch to their pride, and the once confident Brokor now found themselves on the defensive, their pride and strength shattered before the relentless might of the human ship. Rethok, clenching his teeth, tried to maintain some semblance of control. "Regroup, regroup," he ordered over the comms, his voice laced with urgency. But it was clear that the damage was already done. The humans weren't simply attacking. They were systematically dismantling the Brokor fleet, one ship at a time. What the Brokor didn't know was that the human ship wasn't merely surviving or reacting. It was using tactics that made it seem like a far more advanced vessel than anything the Brokor had ever imagined. It wasn't just the sheer firepower or the surprising speed. It was the ship's ability to adapt, to predict and counter the Brokor's every move. It was as though the ship was anticipating their attacks before they even launched them. And then, in a sudden, chilling shift, the human ship revealed its true weaponry. The ship powered up its core once more, the hull glowing with an ominous, almost supernatural light. The Brokor officers watched in stunned silence as the ship's engines roared to life, sending it hurtling through space at an incredible speed, breaking the laws of physics that the Brokor believed to be unbreakable. The ship moved like it had been designed for speed, not like a relic of a forgotten past. Then came the weapon. The human ship unleashed a wave of energy so powerful, it felt like the fabric of space itself was bending under the pressure. The Brokor ships tried to dodge, but the energy wave moved too fast. It sliced through the Brokor fleet with terrifying precision, hitting ship after ship in rapid succession. The energy burst was a coordinated strike that the Brokor had no chance of stopping. One of the Brokor cruisers, already damaged but still holding strong, tried to turn its shields to block the incoming strike. It failed. The wave hit the cruiser with such force that it tore through the shields and into the core, causing the ship to rupture violently. The shockwave from the explosion sent nearby Brokor ships scattering like leaves in a storm. Rethok's eyes widened in horror as he watched his fleet fall apart in front of him. His officers scrambled to assess the damage, but the reports came in faster than they could keep up. "Captain, we've lost contact with several ships. Their systems are completely offline. The human ship was not just a simple relic. It had been hidden. Its true power, its true design, kept secret for generations. What Rethok and his fleet had dismissed as a derelict, forgotten ship was in fact a weapon of unimaginable power. It was not just old, it was ancient, and it was far more advanced than the Brokor had ever believed possible. As the Brokor scrambled to adjust to the sudden onslaught, the human ship seemed to be in perfect harmony with its surroundings, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment to unleash its full potential. It wasn't just firing blindly anymore. It was targeting weaknesses, exploiting every flaw in the Brokor defenses. "Retreat. We need to pull back," one of Rethok's officers shouted, but it was too late. The human ship had already begun to eliminate any hope of escape. Rethok stared at the monitors in disbelief. "No," he muttered under his breath, unwilling to accept the defeat that was unfolding before him. "There has to be more to this." The human ship fired again. This time, it was no single energy beam but a barrage of missiles, each one homing in on its target with deadly precision. The missiles struck a group of Brokor destroyers, piercing their shields and smashing through their hulls like they were made of paper. One by one, the destroyers exploded, lighting up the cold emptiness of space with fiery explosions. The Brokor couldn't stop the onslaught. The tide of battle was turning completely now. The Brokor were reeling, their fleet nearly decimated, and Rethok knew that it was only a matter of time before the entire fleet would be destroyed. It wasn't just the firepower that had caught them off guard. It was the strategy, the intelligence behind the attack. The human ship was fighting with the fury of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. Rethok stood in silence, his mind racing. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had made a fatal mistake by underestimating the human ship. His pride, his entire empire, had been built on the idea that no one could stand against them. Now, it was all crumbling before his eyes. He looked out at the remaining ships in his fleet. There weren't many left, and those that remained were damaged beyond repair, helpless against the relentless assault of the human ship. The Brokor were finished. The humans had turned the tables, and now it was Rethok's turn to face the consequences of his arrogance. The Brokor Empire, once the most feared force in the galaxy, was being torn apart by a single ship, the last remnant of a forgotten race. It was a fate no one had predicted, but the human ship had shown that, no matter how old or outdated, humanity was not to be underestimated. And now, the Brokor were paying the price. The turning point. Rethok's hands were trembling as he stared at the shattered remains of his once mighty fleet. The Brokor had been so sure of their superiority, so confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against them. But now, everything had changed. The human ship, a relic from a time long past, had proven itself far more powerful and cunning than any of them had ever imagined. The destruction of his flagship, the loss of countless ships, and the relentless assault of the human ship had left Rethok in a state of shock. His pride had been shattered, his empire crumbling before his very eyes. The Brokor fleet, once a symbol of power, was now a fractured and broken force, struggling to stay afloat. "Captain, we're losing contact with the last of the fleet," one of Rethok's officers reported, his voice shaky. "The remaining ships are trying to escape, but the human ship is tracking them down. They're not going to make it." Rethok clenched his fists, the cold, hard reality of their situation settling in. His empire, everything he had worked for, was on the verge of collapse. There was no way to turn the tide now. The human ship had been unstoppable, relentless in its pursuit. It had hunted down every Brokor ship with an efficiency that was almost unnerving. But Rethok still had a final card to play. Despite the crushing defeat, his tactical mind was still sharp, and he knew that retreat wasn't an option. Not yet. "We'll make a stand," he said, his voice low but filled with determination. "Order the fleet to regroup. We can't afford to lose any more ships. We'll make one final assault, and we'll take down that human ship, no matter what it costs. His officers hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. It was clear to everyone that the situation was dire. The Brokor were outmatched, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. But Rethok refused to admit defeat. He couldn't allow the humiliation to stand. "Captain, we don't have enough firepower to defeat them," one of the officers argued. "We've lost too many ships." "I said, we make a stand," Rethok repeated, his voice hardening. "Prepare to charge. The human ship cannot be allowed to live. It's time to finish this." The remaining Brokor ships, battered and broken, hesitantly complied, gathering in a last-ditch effort to launch a coordinated strike. They were going to risk everything on this final attack, hoping that somehow they could still defeat the human ship that had already decimated their fleet. But as the Brokor fleet made its move, the human ship anticipated their actions. It wasn't just fighting back. It was reading their movements, predicting their next steps. The human vessel wasn't just a ship. It was a living, breathing force of nature, adapting to every shift in the battle with uncanny precision. Without warning, the human ship fired again. A volley of energy beams shot out, slamming into the heart of the Brokor fleet. The Brokor ships tried to dodge, but the beams hit their targets with unerring accuracy, tearing through shields and ripping apart hulls. The Brokor ships couldn't outrun the firepower. They couldn't outmaneuver it. The human ship was everywhere at once, and it was unstoppable. Rethok watched in horror as the last of his fleet was obliterated. One ship after another was torn apart, leaving nothing but burning wreckage floating in the void. The Brokor, who had once ruled the galaxy with fear, were now reduced to nothing more than scattered debris. "Retreat!" Rethok finally screamed, but it was too late. The human ship had already closed in on his last remaining cruiser. The Brokor captain knew his end was near. His ship, his entire fleet, was doomed. With a final, desperate cry, he ordered the cruiser to self-destruct, hoping to take the human ship down with them. The crew braced themselves for the explosion, but the human ship wasn't caught off guard. It had already anticipated the move, and just as the Brokor cruiser detonated, the human ship's shields flared, absorbing the blast with ease. When the smoke cleared, the Brokor fleet was no more. The human ship, though battered, remained unscathed. The battle was over. The Brokor had been utterly defeated. Rethok stood in stunned silence, his mind racing with disbelief. He had failed. His empire had fallen. And now he knew the truth. The humans, the very race he had mocked, had proven themselves far stronger than anyone had ever given them credit for. The final victory. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The vast expanse of space, once alive with the fury of combat, was now eerily still. The Brokor fleet, once the most fearsome in the galaxy, had been reduced to nothing more than floating debris, scattered and broken. The human ship, battered but unbroken, floated in the middle of the wreckage, a symbol of resilience and power. Rethok stood on the bridge of his flagship, now reduced to nothing but a shattered memory. His officers had fallen silent, their faces pale and weary. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound that remained as the crew surveyed the remains of their once proud fleet. Captain Rethok's eyes, usually filled with the fire of a seasoned leader, were now clouded with disbelief. He had seen entire empires fall before him, watched countless fleets crumble. But this was different. This was humanity, a race he had dismissed as insignificant, a race that had not only survived, but had proven itself more powerful than any of the other galaxy's great empires. As the final Brokor ship fell into space's cold void, Rethok's mind raced with thoughts of the humans. He had been so sure that they were a thing of the past, relics of a bygone era. And yet, this one ship, one solitary human vessel, had managed to destroy everything the Brokor had built. The human ship was slowly powering down, its lights dimming as the battle came to an end. Its crew had fought with a ferocity Rethok had never expected. There was no arrogance, no boastful declarations. The humans had simply fought, had simply won, and in doing so, they had secured a place in the galaxy that no one, not even the Brokor, could ever ignore again. Rethok knew, deep down, that the Brokor had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity, mocked their strength, and now they would pay for it. The galaxy would never forget this day. The defeat of the Brokor was a story that would spread across the stars, a story of how the most powerful empire in the galaxy fell at the hands of an ancient, underestimated human ship. As the last of the Brokor wreckage drifted into the vast darkness of space, the human ship turned, slowly making its way toward the distant stars. It wasn't just the ship that had won this day. It was humanity itself. The crew, the survivors of a once proud race that had been all but forgotten, had proven that no one, no matter how strong or advanced, could ever truly be outmatched. Rethok's thoughts were interrupted as a transmission came through from the human ship. It was a simple message, one that echoed through the empty void, sending a clear and chilling message to the galaxy. "We are not finished," the voice said, calm and unwavering. "And you would do well to remember that." The transmission ended, leaving Rethok to contemplate the words. He had been beaten, humiliated, but there was something more terrifying than the human message. The humans were not finished. They were just beginning. As the human ship sailed off into the stars, leaving behind the wreckage of the Brokor fleet, it became clear humanity had not only survived, but had reclaimed its place in the galaxy. The Brokor had mocked them. They had underestimated them. And now, they had learned the hard way that humans were not to be trifled with. The defeat of the Brokor was only the beginning of what would surely be a new chapter in the galaxy's history. A chapter where humanity would rise, stronger than ever, and show the universe that it had a power far greater than anyone could ever imagine. The Brokor were no more, but humanity, with its old ships, its strength, and its indomitable spirit, would live on.